Hi there, welcome to the Joy of Fixing. Today, we're going to build this awesome outdoor cabinet that has a hidden tool tray and a lot of storage. Plus, it's a great outdoor workbench for potting, for barbecue, for anything. So let's get right into it. There's a 1-hour version of this video in my channel, so you can really see all the details of what happened in this build. If you'd like to watch that, feel free to go back to my channel and check it out. Also, feel free to subscribe. Of course, to build a wooden cabinet, the very first thing you need is wood. So I have this stack of poplar and a little yellow pine, and I'm going to run it all through the thickness planer, just to make sure it's all about the same thickness and get it ready to go so I can build something. What I'm building, I'm actually not sure yet. I just want to get all the lumber ready to go and start coming up with ideas. Because I don't have a jointer, I'm going to have to just snap clean lines down the edges of this and get one straight edge on all these boards, at least the ones that aren't pretty straight. I can run the other side through the table saw. I'm coming up with some rough dimensions. I still don't know what this cabinet's going to look like, but I know how tall and how wide I want it to be, and I know I want it to have a countertop to work on. Of course, that idea will evolve later, as you'll see. I'm going to configure the boards until I find kind of a profile that I like, and I'm going to mark these all so I can biscuit joint them together. I want to make sure they don't get out of order, so every place is labeled. These are going to be my end panels. I could have built this all out of plywood, and you can too, but I'd rather build it out of something with personality, and that's going to be this poplar. A lot of biscuit jointing to do here to turn these boards into panels, and that's just fine by me. A lot of glue, of course, and I'm going to finally get to use some nice big clamps I purchased not too far back for jobs just like this. I was happy to have them standing by in the workshop. These you can get at Harbor Freight, and they are way under $20 a piece for each clamp, which I thought was great. As you can see, I didn't plane this wood to a mirror finish, as I wanted to leave some of the sawmill chatter in it just for a little personality, and it's going to look great. Got to clean up that glue though so it doesn't bother me when I'm staining later. Once these dry up, the next day I go ahead and pull them out of the clamps and set them to the side. I need to start working on my face frame. It's really the place where any great cabinet starts. I'm just going to cut it to what I feel like cutting today. And while I was building it, I decided the front's going to have 3 legs, basically both of the sides and then one dead in the middle, which will create 2 openings, which means I'll probably put 2 doors on it. As you can see, if you can just lay out a nice flat table big enough for your project, you can pretty much design your face frame almost effortlessly by just laying it out and designing it the way you want as you go, or according to whatever sketches you come up with. And finally, this is the way that professional cabinet makers do it. You're just going to get out your pocket hole jig and get these things ready to secure from the back inside of the cabinet where absolutely nobody will ever see them. And you'll be able to put together a fairly rigid face frame, which will then allow you to attach the side panels. I highly recommend doing it this way, and I also highly recommend that pocket holing jig I show in here. I'll put it in the description of the video. I get no compensation whatsoever for it. I just want you to know I really like this one. It's very easy to use, and you'll be able to see just how awesome the face frame of this cabinet turns out. And now, because the face frame is complete, I can assemble these side panels, which I cut to length and width on the table saw and with my circular saw. This will allow me to start building the cube, and it's going to be great. I figured the best way to attach these to the face frame, other than biscuiting them in as well or putting visible screws, was to pocket hole screw them as well, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. We'll join the side panels to the face panel, and we'll have 3 sides of a 4-sided box. That's pretty awesome. Well, now it's looking good, and these are the parts you're going to see the most other than the countertop. I'm very happy with how this turned out, and if you've gotten this far, you probably are too. Now, if you're using different wood stock, maybe you need to use different fastening methods, and that's okay. I'm only going to cover what I'm doing in the video. But feel free to ask questions in the comments section. We always love talking in the comments section. And while you're down there, feel free to like this video. I'd appreciate that too. Well, now we need to stabilize this box. After all, we don't want that face frame flopping around and putting any stress on all those screws. So we're going to go ahead and mark some lines, and we're going to put a bottom in this thing, which will really firm it up and give it a lot more of that cube stability. When I was squaring off all this wood, I was left with a lot of cutoffs, and I love saving these sticks. They're just useful. I don't like burning them in a burn barrel because I always use them. I'm going to go ahead and use these as stringers to secure panels like the top, the back, and of course the bottom inside of this cabinet. Really, really useful, and they're always in places nobody sees them, so they don't have to be perfectly square or anything, although it helps, and these ones were. But you can bend them straight, and you can get them just the way you need them to be. And so that's what we're going to do here. Start building a place to insert that bottom tray. I'm going to go ahead and put one across the top while I'm doing this work and have the cabinet laying down to prepare for something to fasten to the top. Even if I don't fasten the top to it, it at least stabilizes this top run of pocket hold screws for the face frame. And of course I'll finish up the sides for my tray on the bottom. The next thing will be to actually put the bottom in. Now when I purchased this table saw, I purchased it from a guy who was pretty much giving up on carpentry. And so I got a $2,500 saw setup for $300. But what I also got was a stack of scraps that he had from building stuff. In that stack was a whole bunch of 3/4 inch plywood scraps. And so I'm using this little crosscut table that I built, and I'm just going to cut these to the width and the length that I need to piece them together and make a bottom in this cabinet. And now we're going to stand this cabinet up and see what it's starting to look like. And this is where you can really impress yourself because it looks great. It really looks great. We haven't done any sanding, we haven't done any finishing, but look how beautiful that is. You finally get an idea of how big the piece that you're building is going to be. Now, of course, I left some beat up pieces of wood in here for personality. The chip, the burls, the knot, all of this plays into having an interesting personality instead of just a boring piece of furniture, and that's what I want. So now it's time to put in the bottom, and I'm just going to put in those pieces of plywood and nail them down. I'm going to join two pieces of plywood here with a little lapping piece in the middle because I'm making it out of what I have. Guys, this would be a great time to like the video if you haven't yet, and again, I'd love to talk to you in the comments section. We always have a blast in the comments section, and I'd love to hear different things you've built and different ways you've built things like this. Have you built a lot of cabinetry? Me too, but I build it my way, and I'd love to hear your way. See you there. Well, I'm going to put a lot of glue and a lot of nails into this just because I want it firm as a rock. And this cabinet ended up being rock solid. So I'll never regret a single one of those brad nails I threw in here, and I won't regret a single drop of glue. Well, maybe not for this part. Maybe some of the other parts I have to stain later that got a couple drips on them. But this is fine. And we got the bottom in. Of course, we joined that crack together with another scrap, and it is solid. I'm running out of those stringers, so I'm going to have to eat up some of the lumber around here and make a few more. It doesn't really matter which one I use, but I had some poplar. I'm going to start putting this across the bottom of that inside panel because I want it to catch the back panel. And of course I'll put stringers up the sides of the end panels so that everything can catch. And for this I'm going to use plywood. If I was going to build it where the back was visible, I'd just build it out of more poplar. But it'd be heavier, and it'd be a lot more work and a lot more biscuiting. So with this, I'm just going to screw plywood onto the back of it, and that will be more than sufficient, and still probably better than your average store-bought cabinet. Again, I'll stand the cabinet up and be able to take a look at the progress we've made. Really starting to look great. I'm very excited at this point, but we've still got a long way to go. Well, this is the point when it hit me. I could hinge the top of this, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to do it yet, but I didn't want to waste the inside top space in the cabinet like all cabinets do, and I'm not putting any drawers in here. What I decided was to make a hidden tool tray, where you could lift up the cabinet countertop, and there'd be a nice storage tray in there for barbecue tools, hand tools, and other smaller stuff you didn't want to get lost in the bottom of the cabinet. I just have to finish nailing that last stringer in to the back panel, and I've got the full support for a tray. I have this old laminate laying around that's not doing anything. It's thin, it's sturdy. I'm going to cut that in and make it the inside of the bottom of the tool tray because nobody ever sees it, and it's tough. Why not? I have it on hand. I'm also going to slide this little shelf in just for holding bottles of pesticides and other outdoor stuff, any of the little storage. I'll leave one side open for storing big things like 5-gallon buckets. But I want to get this little shelf in before the lid is in and before the tray is in because it's easier to access now. Now that shelf's in, I'm going to pin in all these little boards and go ahead and make that tool tray. And I'm very excited about this because I just came up with this idea on the fly while I was building. That's half the fun of building things with wood. Sometimes you want to build it with no plan and see what happens. I knew the dimensions I needed, but this thing is kind of coming to life all on its own, and it's very exciting. I'm making sure that top's nice and flat because I want it to receive its lid well, without it knocking around and making just weird little noises. It needs to shut nice and square and flat and level, and that's what it's going to do. I'm going to run some more of this yellow pine through the planer and get some boards for my top. I'll cut them to length, and one of them I'm actually going to turn into the back of the countertop and the place the hinges can fasten, as well as the backsplash. I'll rip them, and then I'll screw one through the bottom where no one can see it, up into the other, and it'll act as a backsplash to keep things from falling off the back of the cabinet between the wall and the cabinet itself. I'm pinning that in place with a bunch of glue and 15 gauge nails, which ended up being strong enough to lift the entire cabinet by just that portion. I'll slide this in place, put a little spacer in there for the gap so you don't pinch your fingers too bad when you shut it, and I'm going to screw down these hinges. I've decided to do exposed hardware rather than trying to hide it or do anything fancy. It's an outdoor piece of furniture and it's going to look rustic, so nothing says rustic like seeing some nice big metal hinges. And there it is, the hidden tool tray on top. Once this is being used, and maybe there's a potted plant and a birdhouse and some other knickknacks that live in the carport sitting on this countertop, most people won't notice that, and it's a great place to stash hand tools so they don't walk off. Well, like you can see, we've put more boards through the hand planer, and I've decided this is how I'm going to make the doors. I want the doors to sit flush with the face frame of the cabinet as opposed to sitting outside of it. What I'm going to do is biscuit these together. In fact, I'm going to double biscuit them if you pay attention to what I'm doing there, which means 2 sets of biscuits at every biscuiting point, just to make sure that connection is super strong, super secure, and doesn't have any chance of warping out, at least during the drying process. But in the end, the glue will do most of the work. So I'll clamp these up and let them dry. And when I peel them loose, I'll run them through the saw and size them up so that they fit in the hole. The hole's looking nice and square as it was built, and now I'm just going to take some measurements. I'm going to leave probably somewhere around 1/4 inch all the way around if I can help myself. So, off to the table saw. These are some big heavy doors, and I'm going to need some big heavy hardware, but it's a good thing we already went heavy on the top. Finally, after all of that building, it's time for some sanding, working from an 80 grit up to 120, and then even up to a 180 grit. That seemed like just enough for me. Getting out all the extra little glue marks and all the last marks from when we were lining up with pencil for the jointing. Cleaning up that little rough spot that I love so much, and getting ready for putting in wood filler. Now, one of my favorites, after all these years, is still a product that a lot of people look past for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe they buy Minwax, maybe they buy Tite Bond, maybe they buy something fancier at Rockler Hardwoods. But for filler, well, I'll show you. Let me clean up this table real quick. I've made quite a mess out here, and I might as well burn the wood scraps while I'm at it. Nothing a couple of stain-covered rags can't solve. So like I said, I like another brand. I like Elmer's. Good old-fashioned Elmer's. Fills the cracks great, dries up nice, sands perfect, doesn't stain the wood around the filling area. Still my favorite, can't tell me otherwise, although I'd love to try some other stuff out, but everything I've tried, I always come back to Elmer's. Speaking of sanding, it's time for the last of the sanding, and I'm so excited because sanding filler's the fun thing to sand. Sands down super easy, fills up all the cracks, and really brings together all those different pieces of wood that you took to build the face frame and other parts of the cabinetry. Time to hit it with a little air, a little tack cloth, and get it nice and clean and ready for a stage I've been waiting for. The staining process. Now first I'm hitting it with pre-treater. Not that the poplar needs it at all, but I'm going to pre-treat it anyway. What really needs it is the pine, the tops, and the doors. Most pine or fir is horrible wood to stain, but if you use pre-stain, pre-treatment, it's going to really make it open up and take that stain a lot nicer and more evenly. And so that's what I did. If you watch the longer video, you can see the process I went through to test it with the pre-stain and without. And now what we've all been waiting for. These beautiful pieces of wood I selected because of their vibrant personality get some stain that will really draw out the fibers and the darkness and the movement of the wood, the burls, the knots, all the personality that I was hoping would show up. And as you can see, it really starts to pop. I'm excited about the end panels because, like I said, when I planed it, I left some of that sawmill chatter in there from the wood mill, so you could really see that this was wood mill lumber. And it's super exciting. After that first staining, you can really see the personality from the saw blade coming out in that wood, and the knots are really popping. Now there's those doors that are pre-treated, and thank goodness they took the stain very nicely. Same with the top. You can see how nice and evenly it took it. Go ahead and try staining a piece of fur without that, I dare you. Good old wipe-on polyurethane. Big favorite for me. You don't want to spray, you don't want to roll it on. Just a nice heavy coat. Wiped on with a rag, sanded with 400 grit after it dries, and another coat or two after that with the same process. Beautiful. And there's the doors. I used some spacers to hold them in place, and used the same hardware I used for the top on the doors. Now I wasn't sure what to use for latches here, but I hated pretty much everything that was an option to me. And so I finally decided on something that was more utilitarian, and I'm so happy that I did because it makes the cabinet look great and those doors shut perfect every time. And what I'm talking about is these little gate latches. Nice. One last latch to go, and we're about done. This project took me over a month, working on it about an hour a day on good days. And here it is. Look how good that looks. Almost like an old ice box. It's time to take it up to the carport and give it its final resting place. And just look how it turned out. Absolutely beautiful. I'm so happy with it. It's so nice to walk past instead of another pile of wood with junk laying all over it. And look, all my little hand tools and barbecue tools right there in the top. Looking great. Well, that's about it. I sure hope you guys enjoyed watching this. I had a great time building it. Even though it took me a long time, that's alright. And as always, a little voice of encouragement to any of you suffering chronic pain or a disability. I know it hurts, I know it's rough, and I know it feels impossible to push through the pain. Even if it's just a few minutes, start a project. Even if it's going to take you months, start a project. Get into something. Make something. You still have value. That's it. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. And I hope you get to build something awesome. Maybe it's not this cabinet. Maybe it's not even a cabinet. But I hope you build something great, and I hope you love it for a long time. God bless. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.